The sound of breaking glass pierced the night as Thea Warren pressed her back against the rough wall of the run-down cabin, watching her husband Jeb smash another empty bottle against the hearth. It was 1878 in the unforgiving territory of Wyoming, and winter was closing in with the merciless certainty of death itself. "Damn you, woman, there ain't a drop left in this whole God-forsaken house." Jeb's words slurred together as he staggered toward her, his bloodshot eyes narrowed with malice. 5 years of marriage had whittled away whatever love might have existed between them, leaving only the sharp edges of resentment and fear. "The money's gone, Jeb. I told you yesterday. We need to save what little we have for food." Thea's voice remained steady despite the trembling in her hands. At 24, the hopeful girl who had once dreamed of a life filled with love and children had been replaced by a woman who measured success in days survived. Jeb spat on the floor. "Food, always food with you." He grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her flesh. "You ain't worth half what I paid your pa for you." Thea wrenched her arm away, a spark of defiance flaring despite years of subjugation. "I never asked to be sold like cattle, and you haven't been much of a bargain yourself." The back of his hand connected with her cheek before she could step away. The familiar taste of blood filled her mouth as she stumbled backward. "Maybe I ought to get my investment back," Jeb muttered, a dangerous new light entering his eyes. Plenty of men in Sweetwater would pay good money for a woman, even one as troublesome as you. Thea felt ice replace the blood in her veins. She had heard stories of women sold to brothels or trading posts, their lives reduced to servitude of the worst kind. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Jeb's laughter was cruel. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we're heading to town, and you'd best look presentable." He staggered to the bed they once shared, collapsing onto it without removing his boots. Within minutes, his snores filled the small cabin. Thea sank to the floor, her mind racing. She had nowhere to go, no family who would take her in. Her father had practically celebrated when Jeb had offered to marry her, glad to have one less mouth to feed. Her mother had been gone for years, and her brothers had scattered to the winds in search of their fortunes. As the night deepened, she considered running away, but the wilderness surrounding their isolated cabin was unforgiving. Wolves, bandits, and the coming winter were all but certain death for a lone woman with nothing but the clothes on her back. Better to face whatever awaited her in Sweetwater than die alone in the wilderness. With resignation settling over her like a shroud, Thea curled up on the floor near the dying embers of the fire, too afraid to sleep beside the man who had promised to cherish her until death parted them. Morning came with brutal swiftness. Jeb kicked her awake before dawn, his expression grim and determined, the effects of last night's liquor having hardened into a vicious resolve. "Get yourself cleaned up. Put on that blue dress your ma made for the wedding. Might as well look like something worth buying." His words sent a fresh wave of terror through her, but Thea obeyed, washing with the freezing water from the bucket by the door. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a woman with hollow cheeks and eyes that had seen too much hardship. She pinned her long brown hair up as best she could, her fingers clumsy with fear. The journey to Sweetwater took most of the morning, the rickety wagon jolting over the uneven trail. Thea sat rigidly beside Jeb, her mind frantically searching for a solution, a way out of the nightmare her life had become. But each desperate thought led to the same dead end. She was alone, friendless, and at the mercy of a man who saw her as property to be bartered. Sweetwater sprawled before them, a rough collection of wooden buildings and muddy streets that served as the central hub for ranchers, miners, and drifters. The saloon stood at the heart of it all, the piano music spilling out onto the street even at this early hour. "Remember to keep your mouth shut unless someone asks you a direct question," Jeb instructed as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "And don't you dare try to run. There ain't nowhere to go that I won't find you." Thea nodded mechanically, her throat too dry for words. She climbed down from the wagon, her legs threatening to buckle beneath her. The blue dress that had once been her pride felt like a costume now, a mockery of the hopeful bride she had been. The Lucky Nugget saloon reeked of whiskey, sweat, and stale tobacco. Despite the early hour, Several tables were occupied by men playing cards or nursing drinks. A woman in a garish red dress was singing a melancholy tune on the small stage, her voice surprisingly sweet in such a rough setting. Jeb steered Thea toward the bar, his hand clamped around her upper arm. "2 whiskeys," he told the bartender, a balding man with suspicious eyes. "It's mighty early," the bartender commented, but he poured the drinks without further question. Jeb downed his in one swallow and nudged the second toward Thea. "Drink up. Might be the last courtesy I show you." Thea lifted the glass with trembling hands, the burn of the whiskey doing little to thaw the ice in her veins. She felt eyes on her from around the room. A woman in a respectable dress was an unusual sight in a place like this. Jeb leaned close to the bartender, his voice low but not low enough that Thea couldn't hear. "Looking to make a trade. My wife for a good supply of whiskey. She's healthy, can cook, and ain't bad to look at when she keeps her opinions to herself." The bartender's eyebrows shot up. "I ain't in that line of business, mister. You want the brothel 3 doors down." "Not looking for a brothel price," Jeb argued. "She's a proper wife, not some soiled dove, worth at least 20 bottles of your best." The bartender shook his head. "Can't help you. And I'd advise you to keep such talk quiet. Sheriff Wilson don't take kindly to that sort of dealing." Jeb cursed under his breath and dragged Thea away from the bar. "We'll try somewhere else." The next hour passed in a blur of humiliation as Jeb paraded her through various establishments, making his crude offer to increasingly dubious men. Some laughed in his face, others threatened to call the sheriff, and a few regarded Thea with a predatory interest that made her skin crawl. By midday, they had made their way to the Silver Spur, a smaller saloon at the edge of town that catered to a rougher crowd. The owner, a man with a scar bisecting his face, listened to Jeb's proposition with unsettling interest. "I might be able to make use of her," the man said, looking Thea up and down like she was a horse at auction. 10 bottles, not 20. 15, Jeb countered, "and she comes with the wedding ring. Real silver, that is." Thea closed her eyes, feeling the last shreds of her dignity being stripped away. The men haggled over her as if she weren't standing right there, as if she were nothing more than the bottles of liquor they were discussing. "They're a problem here." A deep voice cut through the negotiation, causing both men to turn. A tall figure stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. As he stepped into the dimness of the saloon, Thea could make out his features: a strong jaw dusted with stubble, keen eyes the color of a summer storm, and dark hair that curled slightly beneath a well-worn hat. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy: denim pants, a simple shirt, a weathered leather vest, and boots that had seen many miles. "Private business," Jeb snapped. "Keep moving, stranger." The newcomer ignored him, his gaze fixing on Thea's face, lingering on the bruise blooming on her cheek. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of anger quickly controlled. "Sounds to me like you're trying to sell something that ain't rightly yours to sell," the cowboy said, his voice deceptively casual. "She's my wife, and that makes her mine by law," Jeb retorted. The cowboy took another step forward. "That's not how the law works, friend. Marriage ain't ownership." Jeb's face flushed with anger. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Name's Isaac Morgan." The cowboy's hand rested casually on his belt, not far from the holstered revolver at his hip. "I've got a proposition for you that might be more beneficial than whatever deal you're working on here." "Unless you're offering whiskey, I ain't interested." Isaac's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm offering something better, 20 gold eagles for the lady's freedom." The saloon fell silent. 20 gold eagles was a small fortune in these parts, enough to buy a decent piece of land or a fine horse and still have money left over. Jeb's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's the catch?" "No catch. The lady walks out of here with me, free and clear. You get the money and we all go our separate ways." Isaac's tone was reasonable, but there was steel beneath it. "Why would you pay that much for a woman you don't know?" the scarred saloon owner asked, voicing the question Thea herself was thinking. Isaac's gaze never left Jeb's face. "My reasons are my own. Do we have a deal?" Thea held her breath. 20 gold eagles was far more than Jeb could hope to get from anyone else, especially for a wife he clearly considered troublesome. She could see the greed battling with suspicion in his eyes. 30, Jeb countered, apparently deciding that greed would win the day. 25, Isaac replied. Final offer. Jeb glanced at Thea, then back at the imposing cowboy. She ain't worth the trouble anyway. 25 it is. The transaction was completed with unsettling efficiency. Isaac counted out 25 gold coins onto the scarred wooden table. Jeb snatched them up, barely bothering to verify the count, his eyes already glazed with the anticipation of the liquor he could purchase. She's all yours, Jeb declared, stepping away from Thea as if she had suddenly become a stranger. Good riddance. Thea stood frozen, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. She had been actually sold by the man who had vowed to protect her. And now she belonged to this stranger with the storm-gray eyes and the inexplicable generosity. No, she isn't mine, Isaac said, his voice carrying clearly through the saloon. She's her own woman now. He turned to Thea, his expression softening. Madam, you're free to go wherever you please. I'll escort you to safety if you'd like, but you don't owe me anything. Thea stared at him, searching for the hidden agenda, the unspoken expectation that must surely exist. No man paid 25 gold eagles out of pure altruism. Why? She finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Because no person should be bought or sold, Isaac answered simply. Shall we go, or would you prefer to stay with your husband? The last word was laced with contempt as he glanced at Jeb, who was already at the bar ordering his first bottle. I have nowhere to go, Thea admitted, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. Freedom was a terrifying prospect when it came with homelessness. I can help with that, Isaac offered. I know a respectable boarding house in town. The owner, Mrs. Holloway, is a good woman who might be able to offer you work as well as lodging. The offer seemed too good to be true, but Thea could see no malice in Isaac's steady gaze. And staying in this saloon near Jeb was unthinkable. Thank you, she said at last. I would appreciate that. Isaac nodded, gesturing toward the door. After you, madam. As Thea stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, she felt a strange lightness despite the uncertainty that loomed before her. For the first time in years, she was not Jeb Warren's wife. She was simply Thea, a woman with an unexpected second chance at life. Isaac led her to a sturdy bay horse tethered outside. We can ride to the boarding house. It's not far, but you look like you could use a rest. Thea hesitated, eyeing the large animal with trepidation. I've never been comfortable on horseback. A small smile tugged at Isaac's lips. Maverick here is gentle as they come. I'll walk alongside if that helps. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. After years of Jeb's cruelty, such consideration was almost painful in its unfamiliarity. Thea nodded, accepting his help to mount the horse. The saddle was warm beneath her, and Maverick stood patiently as she arranged her skirts. Isaac took the reins and began leading the horse down the muddy street. Mrs. Warren, please, Thea interrupted. I'd rather not use that name anymore. Thea will do. Isaac nodded in understanding. Thea, then, I meant what I said back there. You don't owe me anything for what happened today. You spent a small fortune to help a stranger, Thea pointed out. Most would expect something in return. I'm not most people, Isaac replied, and money is just money. Some things are worth more. Like what? Isaac was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the street ahead. Like doing what's right when the opportunity presents itself, like not standing by while someone suffers if you have the power to stop it. There was a story there, Thea sensed, something personal that drove his actions, but she didn't press. This man had already done more for her than anyone in her memory. She owed him the courtesy of respecting his privacy. The boarding house was a tidy 2-story building with white curtains in the windows and a small garden out front. A sign above the door read, Holloway Boarding House Clean Rooms, Fair Prices. Mrs. Holloway herself answered the door, a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She listened to Isaac's abbreviated explanation of Thea's situation without interruption, then nodded decisively. I've got a small room on the second floor that should suit, she told Thea. And I could use help with the laundry and cooking. It won't pay much beyond your room and board at first, but it's honest work. That would be wonderful, Thea said, emotion tightening her throat. I'm a hard worker and I'm good with a needle if you need mending done as well. Mrs. Holloway's expression warmed. Sounds like Providence brought you to my door, child. Come in and get settled. Isaac tipped his hat. I'll leave you in Mrs. Holloway's capable hands then. She's looked after me whenever I'm in town, so I know you'll be well cared for. Wait, Thea said, suddenly reluctant to see him go. Will I see you again? To thank you properly, I mean. I'll be in Sweetwater for a few more days before heading back to the Circle M, he replied. Perhaps I'll stop by tomorrow to see how you're settling in, if that's acceptable. Mrs. Holloway gave a small harumph. You're welcome for dinner tomorrow, Isaac Morgan, provided you wash up proper first. 6 o'clock sharp. Isaac grinned, the expression transforming his serious face. Yes, madam. I wouldn't dare be late for your cooking. As he mounted Maverick and rode away, Thea felt a curious mixture of gratitude and loss. This stranger had upended her world in the space of an hour, rescuing her from a fate worse than the one she'd already been living. Yet she knew nothing about him beyond his name and his inexplicable kindness. He's a good man, that one, Mrs. Holloway commented, watching Isaac disappear down the street. Too serious for his years, but solid as they come. Now, let's get you settled. You look dead on your feet, poor thing. The room was indeed small, but to Thea it seemed like paradise clean and private, with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the street. After years in Jeb's squalid cabin, the simple cleanliness of the space brought tears to her eyes. The washroom is at the end of the hall, Mrs. Holloway explained. Dinner's at 6, but I suspect you might want to rest first. We can discuss your duties tomorrow. Left alone, Thea sank onto the bed, the events of the day crashing over her like a wave. She had awakened this morning as a man's property, facing a future of degradation and despair. Now she was free, with a roof over her head and the promise of honest work, all because a stranger had decided she was worth saving. For the first time in years, Thea allowed herself to weep not from despair, but from the overwhelming relief of unexpected salvation. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost patterns decorating the small window of Thea's room. She woke early, habit driving her from the comfortable bed despite her exhaustion. For a moment, disorientation gripped her as she stared at the unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned, bringing with it a surge of gratitude so intense it was almost painful. She dressed quickly in the same blue dress, smoothing its wrinkles as best she could. It was the only decent garment she owned, and she would need to look presentable for her first day of work. Her few other belongings remained at the cabin with Jeb, not that there was much worth retrieving. Mrs. Holloway was already in the kitchen when Thea made her way downstairs, kneading dough with practiced movements. Good morning, child. Did you sleep well? The older woman's shrewd eyes took in Thea's appearance, lingering on the fading bruise on her cheek. Better than I have in years, Thea admitted. Thank you again for taking me in. Mrs. Holloway waved away her thanks. Any friend of Isaac's is welcome here. Besides, I've been needing help since my arthritis got worse. She gestured toward a pot of coffee on the stove. Help yourself, then we can discuss your duties. The work was straightforward enough: laundry for the boarders, assistance with cooking and cleaning, and mending when required. Mrs. Holloway was particular but fair, showing Thea the routines of the boarding house with patient efficiency. Most of my boarders are respectable working men, Mrs. Holloway explained as they prepared breakfast. Shopkeepers, clerks from the bank, a young doctor who's just starting his practice. I don't tolerate drunkenness or impropriety under my roof. It sounds wonderful, Thea said sincerely. After years of isolation at the cabin, the prospect of a house full of civilized people was appealing rather than intimidating. The morning passed quickly, filled with the satisfying rhythm of productive work. Thea found herself smiling as she hung freshly washed sheets on the line behind the house, the simple domestic task feeling like freedom after the prison her marriage had become. You've got a natural touch with laundry, Mrs. Holloway commented, coming to inspect her work. Those sheets are whiter than when Mary Williams does them, and she's been helping me for months. My mother taught me well, Thea replied, pleased by the praise. Though we never had soap as fine as yours. Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. We'll get along just fine, I think. Now there's a dress in the mending basket that might fit you with some alterations. I thought you might like something fresh to wear, especially for dinner tonight." Thea blinked back unexpected tears at the kindness. "That would be wonderful, thank you." The dress was a simple calico in a soft green shade, modest but far newer than anything Thea had owned in years. She spent her afternoon rest period carefully altering it, grateful for the needle and thread Mrs. Holloway had provided. As 6 o'clock approached, Thea found herself growing inexplicably nervous. She had changed into the green dress, washed her face, and pinned her hair in a neater style than she had managed yesterday. Yet her hands trembled slightly as she descended the stairs, and her heart beat a rapid rhythm against her ribs. "It's only dinner," she told herself firmly. A chance to properly thank the man who helped you, nothing more. But even as she thought it, Thea knew she was lying to herself. There was something about Isaac Morgan that had touched her, beyond the obvious gratitude she felt for his intervention. Something in his steady gaze and quiet strength that called to a part of her she had thought long dead. Isaac arrived precisely at 6, having clearly taken Mrs. Holloway's instructions about washing up to heart. His dark hair was damp and neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, and he wore a fresh shirt under his leather vest. He looked younger without the trail dust, though the seriousness in his eyes remained. "Evening, Mrs. Holloway," he greeted, removing his hat as he entered. Then his gaze found Thea and something in his expression shifted. "Miss Thea, you're looking well." "Thanks to your kindness," she replied, "and Mrs. Holloway's generosity." The green dress felt suddenly inadequate under his appreciative gaze. Mrs. Holloway bustled between them, gesturing toward the dining room. "Stop blocking my hallway, the both of you. Dinner's on the table and getting cold." The meal was simple but delicious: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed more easily than Thea had expected, with Mrs. Holloway keeping things light with tales of her more eccentric boarders. "So what brings you to Sweetwater this time, Isaac?" Mrs. Holloway asked as she served the pie. "Supplies for the ranch," Isaac nodded. "That and delivering some paperwork for Mr. Miller. We're expanding the herd next spring, so there's more business than usual to attend to." "The Circle M is a cattle ranch?" Thea asked, curious about the place Isaac called home. "Started as one," he confirmed. "But Mr. Miller's been diversifying over the years. We raise horses now too, and there's good cropland in the valley portion of the property." "Isaac here is more than just a cowhand," Mrs. Holloway informed Thea with obvious pride. "He's foreman of the whole operation, has been since Mr. Miller's son moved back east." A flush of color touched Isaac's cheekbones. "It's not as grand as it sounds. The Circle M is modest compared to some of the big spreads." "Modest enough to employ 15 men year-round and twice that during the busy season," Mrs. Holloway countered. "Don't let his humility fool you, Thea. Isaac runs that ranch as efficiently as any operation in the territory." Thea studied Isaac with new interest. He didn't carry himself with the swagger of most successful men she'd encountered. There was a quietness to him, a self-contained quality that spoke of inner strength rather than the need to dominate others. "How long have you worked there?" she asked. 7 years now. Came west after the war with not much more than the clothes on my back and a bad case of restlessness." There was a shadow in his eyes as he mentioned the war, a hint of old pain quickly masked. "Mr. Miller took a chance on me when I didn't have much to recommend me. I owe him a great deal." "You've more than repaid any debt with your loyalty," Mrs. Holloway said firmly. "That man thinks of you as the son he lost." Isaac shifted uncomfortably at the praise. "How are you finding Sweetwater, Thea?" he asked, clearly eager to change the subject. "I haven't seen much beyond this house," she admitted, "but Mrs. Holloway has been incredibly welcoming. I've been hired to help with the boarding house." "A perfect arrangement," Isaac declared. "Mrs. Holloway gets the help she needs and you have a safe place to stay." "For now," Thea agreed, "though I'll need to think about my future eventually." The idea of having a future to plan was still new and slightly overwhelming. "There's no rush," Mrs. Holloway assured her. "You're welcome here as long as you need." After dinner, Mrs. Holloway shooed them onto the front porch, claiming she needed peace to finish the dishes properly. "Take some air," she instructed. "It's a fine evening for October." The night was indeed beautiful, with stars scattered across the black velvet sky and a crescent moon providing just enough light to see by. Thea wrapped a borrowed shawl around her shoulders against the autumn chill as she settled onto the porch swing. Isaac leaned against the railing, his profile strong in the dim light. "How are you really doing?" he asked quietly. "Yesterday was difficult." Thea considered the question seriously. "I'm still trying to understand that it's real," she finally said. "That I'm free of him, that I have choices now." "You do have choices," Isaac confirmed, "more than might be immediately apparent, because of you." Thea met his gaze directly. "I need to understand why you did it, Isaac." 25 gold eagles is a small fortune. You could have bought land of your own with that money." Isaac was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose I could have," he acknowledged, "but I wouldn't have slept well knowing I'd walked away and left you to that fate." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His voice was low, intense. "I know you didn't deserve what was happening to you. No one does." Thea sensed there was more he wasn't saying. "There's a personal reason, isn't there? Something in your past." Isaac looked away, his jaw tightening. "My mother," he finally said. "She was in a similar situation once. No one helped her." Understanding dawned. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." Isaac straightened, visibly shaking off the memory. "My point is, you don't need to worry about the money or feel indebted. Consider it an investment in justice, if you like." Thea smiled slightly. "That's a generous way to look at it." "I'm not typically known for my generosity," Isaac admitted, a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. "Just ask any of the hands at the Circle M. They call me Iron Isaac behind my back." "I find that hard to believe. It's true enough. I run a tight operation and I don't tolerate slacking." A small smile curved his lips. "But I'm not completely unreasonable, just particular about doing things properly." "There's nothing wrong with having standards," Thea said. "It's the difference between cruelty and discipline." Isaac's gaze sharpened. "Yes, exactly. That's a distinction many fail to make." They lapsed into comfortable silence, the only sound the gentle creaking of the swing as Thea pushed it back and forth with one foot. The town around them had quieted as evening deepened, though occasional bursts of piano music and laughter drifted from the saloons several streets away. "What will you do now?" Isaac finally asked. "Beyond working for Mrs. Holloway, I mean," Thea sighed. "I honestly don't know. I never expected to have this kind of freedom again. I was 16 when my father arranged my marriage to Jeb. I haven't been on my own since." "You're young still. Many possibilities lie ahead." "Perhaps," Thea agreed. "But with no money and no family to support me, those possibilities are somewhat limited." Isaac frowned. "You have no family at all." "My mother died when I was 14. My father remarried quickly to a woman who didn't want his children underfoot. My brothers scattered last I heard. One was mining in Colorado and the other had joined the army." Thea shrugged. "We were never close anyway." "I'm sorry," Isaac said quietly. "Family should be a source of support, not pain." "What about you?" Thea asked, curious about the man who had so drastically changed her life. "Do you have family?" "Not anymore. My father died in '63 during the war. My mother followed a few years later. No siblings." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Thea sensed the loneliness beneath the simple statement. "So the Circle M is your home now?" Isaac nodded. "As much as anywhere can be. Mr. Miller and his wife have been good to me. The ranch hands are like brothers in many ways, though most don't stay more than a season or two before moving on." "It sounds like a good life," Thea said sincerely. "It is." Isaac straightened from the railing. "I should be going. It's getting late, and I have business to finish tomorrow before heading back to the ranch." Disappointment flickered through Thea at the thought of him leaving Sweetwater. "Will I see you again before you go?" "If you'd like," Isaac replied, something warming in his eyes. "I could stop by tomorrow afternoon, perhaps show you a bit of the town if Mrs. Holloway can spare you." "I'd like that very much." Isaac nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "Until tomorrow, then." He hesitated, then added softly, "I'm glad to see you looking more at peace, Thea. It suits you." Before she could respond, he was gone, his long strides carrying him quickly down the street. Thea remained on the swing, watching until he disappeared into the darkness, a curious lightness in her chest despite the uncertainty of her future. The next day passed in a blur of productive work. Thea threw herself into her duties at the boarding house, grateful for the distraction from thoughts of Isaac and their impending outing. Mrs. Holloway kept her busy with laundry and meal preparation, but the older woman was clearly pleased with Thea's efficiency. "You're a godsend, child, Mrs. Holloway declared as Thea efficiently mended a tear in one of the boarder's shirts. "I haven't seen stitches that neat since my own mother was alive." "I enjoy the work," Thea replied honestly. "It feels good to be useful." Mrs. Holloway patted her shoulder. "Isaac mentioned he might call for you this afternoon. I can manage without you for a few hours." Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He offered to show me the town a bit. I hope that's acceptable." "More than acceptable. You need to get your bearings if you're going to make a life here, Mrs. Holloway's shrewd eyes twinkled. "And Isaac Morgan is an excellent guide, respectful, knowledgeable, and easy on the eyes to boot." "Mrs. Holloway," Thea protested, her blush deepening. The older woman laughed. "I'm old, not blind, dear. And I've known Isaac long enough to recognize when he's taken an interest in someone. He doesn't offer tours of Sweetwater to just anyone." Thea didn't know how to respond to that observation. The idea that Isaac might be interested in her beyond simple kindness was both thrilling and terrifying. After her experience with Jeb, the prospect of any man's attention carried a shadow of fear. Yet Isaac was nothing like Jeb. Every interaction had shown him to be thoughtful, respectful, and honorable. The kind of man Thea might have dreamed of before life had taught her to stop dreaming altogether. Isaac arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, dressed in his usual practical attire, but with a freshly ironed shirt that suggested he had made an effort for the occasion. He greeted Mrs. Holloway warmly before turning to Thea, his gaze appreciative as it took in her appearance in the green dress. "You look lovely," he said simply. Ready to see what Sweetwater has to offer, the afternoon that followed was one of the most pleasant in Thea's memory. Isaac proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out not just the obvious landmarks, the bank, the general store, the church, but also sharing tidbits of local history and character. "That's where old Sam Wilson holds court," he explained, nodding toward a bench outside the barber shop where an elderly man was engaged in animated conversation with several listeners. "He came west with the first wagon trains and has been telling the same stories for 30 years, each time with a little more embellishment." Thea laughed. "Every town needs its storyteller." "Indeed." Isaac's expression softened as he looked at her. "You have a beautiful laugh." "I don't imagine you've had much cause to use it recently." "Not for a long time," Thea admitted. "It feels strange but good." They continued their walk, Isaac carefully steering them away from the rougher parts of town. Thea was grateful for his consideration. The last thing she wanted was to encounter Jeb in one of the saloons, though she suspected he had likely drunk through his newfound wealth and moved on already. "There's a dressmaker on the next street who might be looking for help," Isaac mentioned as they passed a row of shops. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned you're skilled with a needle." Thea glanced at him in surprise. "You've been making inquiries on my behalf." A flush touched Isaac's cheekbones. "I may have mentioned your situation to a few trustworthy people. Nothing specific, just that a new arrival with sewing skills was looking for opportunities." The gesture touched her deeply. "Thank you, that's incredibly thoughtful. It's the least I can do." Isaac hesitated, then added, "I'll be heading back to the Circle M tomorrow morning. I'd feel better knowing you have options beyond the boarding house, though Mrs. Holloway is the best of women." Reality intruded on the pleasant afternoon. Of course, Isaac would be leaving. He had a life and responsibilities elsewhere. Thea had no claim on his time or attention beyond the debt of gratitude she already owed. "I'll be fine," she assured him, trying to keep disappointment from her voice. "Mrs. Holloway has been more than kind, and I'm good at adapting." Isaac nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "The Circle M is only half a day's ride from here. I come to Sweetwater regularly on ranch business." "Then perhaps our paths will cross again," Thea said lightly. "I'd like that." Isaac's tone held a warmth that made her heart beat faster. "In fact, I was hoping, that is, I wondered if you might consider corresponding while I'm away." Thea blinked in surprise. "You want to exchange letters?" If you're amenable. Isaac looked uncharacteristically uncertain. It would be a way to stay connected, to learn more about each other, and I'd feel better knowing how you're faring. The request was unexpected but not unwelcome. In fact, the prospect of maintaining a connection with Isaac sent a flutter of anticipation through Thea's chest. "I'd like that very much," she said sincerely. Relief and pleasure crossed Isaac's face. "Good, that's good." They continued their walk, the conversation flowing more easily now that the question of future contact had been settled. Isaac showed her the small lending library attached to the schoolhouse, the milliner's shop where the more fashionable ladies of Sweetwater purchased their hats, and finally, a small park at the edge of town where a creek provided a peaceful soundtrack to their discussion. "It's more civilized than I expected," Thea admitted as they sat on a bench overlooking the water. "Jeb always made town sound like a den of iniquity." "Parts of it are," Isaac acknowledged, "but Sweetwater has grown beyond its rough beginnings. There are decent people building lives here, families putting down roots." "It sounds nice," Thea said wistfully. "Having roots." Isaac studied her profile. "You could have that here if you wanted. A fresh start." "Perhaps." Thea watched the water rippling over stones. "I'm still getting used to having choices at all." "That's understandable." Isaac's voice was gentle. "There's no rush to decide anything." As the afternoon waned, they made their way back toward the boarding house. The streets were busier now, with people finishing their workday and heading home for dinner. Isaac nodded greetings to several townsfolk, clearly well known and respected in the community. They were nearly at Mrs. Holloway's when a commotion erupted from the saloon across the street. The batwing doors burst open, and a familiar figure stumbled out, clearly intoxicated and belligerent. Jeb, Thea instinctively stepped closer to Isaac, her body tensing as her former husband. She reminded herself spotted them and lurched in their direction. "Well, if it ain't my wife and her fancy man," Jeb slurred, his bloodshot eyes narrowed with malice. "Enjoying my leavings, Cowboy." Isaac stepped slightly in front of Thea, his posture relaxed but alert. "Move along, Warren, you've had your money. The lady is no longer your concern." Jeb spat on the ground. 25 eagles don't buy you the right to tell me what to do. She's damaged goods anyway. You'll see soon enough." Thea felt a flash of humiliation, quickly followed by anger. "I'm standing right here, Jeb, and I'm not goods, damaged or otherwise." "Listen to her, all high and mighty now," Jeb sneered. "A few days away from the cabin and she thinks she's a lady." He took another step forward, swaying slightly. "I want my ring back, the silver one. It was my mother's. You sold it along with me," Thea replied coldly. "But I don't have it anyway. It's probably in a pawn shop by now, like everything else of value I ever owned." Jeb's face contorted with rage. "You lying," he lunged forward, hand raised to strike. Isaac moved with surprising speed for such a large man. One moment he was beside Thea, the next he had Jeb's wrist in a grip that made the smaller man wince. "That's enough," Isaac said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You've made a spectacle of yourself, and now you're going to walk away before this gets worse for you." Jeb struggled briefly, then went still as Isaac applied slightly more pressure. "You can't threaten me, I got rights. Not to her, you don't." Isaac released him with a small shove that sent Jeb stumbling backward. "Not anymore. Now go sleep it off, and when you wake up, I suggest you move on from Sweetwater. This town isn't big enough for both of you, and she has more claim to stay than you do." A small crowd had gathered, watching the confrontation with the avid interest of people hungry for entertainment. Jeb looked around, perhaps realizing how many witnesses were present, and some of the fight seemed to go out of him. "She ain't worth the trouble," he muttered, though the look he shot Thea was venomous. "Keep her. I'm heading to California anyway. Nothing but bad memories in this God-forsaken territory." With that, he staggered away, cursing under his breath. The crowd, disappointed that the entertainment had ended so quickly, began to disperse. Thea realized she was trembling, delayed reaction setting in now that the immediate threat had passed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I hoped we wouldn't encounter him." Isaac's expression was concerned as he studied her face. "Are you all right? He didn't frighten you too badly." "I'm fine," Thea assured him, though her voice wasn't entirely steady. just startled and embarrassed that everyone saw that. You have nothing to be embarrassed about, Isaac said firmly. He's the one who made a fool of himself. He offered his arm. Let's get you back to Mrs. Holloway's. I think we've had enough excitement for one afternoon. Mrs. Holloway took one look at Thea's pale face when they returned and immediately bustled her into the kitchen for a restorative cup of tea. Isaac explained the encounter briefly, his account matter of fact but omitting the more humiliating aspects of Jeb's behavior. That man should be run out of town on a rail, Mrs. Holloway declared indignantly, causing a scene in the middle of the street like some common drunkard. I think he'll be moving on soon enough, Isaac replied. He mentioned California. Good riddance, Mrs. Holloway sniffed. Thea is well shot of him. Thea managed a small smile at the older woman's protective vehemence. The encounter with Jeb had been unpleasant, but it had also reinforced how dramatically her circumstances had changed in just 2 days. She was no longer under his control, no longer required to endure his cruelty or drunken rages. She was free. Isaac stayed for dinner again, the conversation gradually moving away from the incident with Jeb to more pleasant topics. Mrs. Holloway regaled them with tales of her youth in Boston, painting a vivid picture of a life far removed from the frontier realities of Wyoming territory. As the evening drew to a close, Isaac reluctantly announced that he needed to return to his room at the hotel to finish packing for his departure the next morning. I'll be leaving at first light, he explained. Mr. Miller is expecting me back by midday. Then I suppose this is goodbye for now, Thea said, trying to keep disappointment from her voice. For now, Isaac agreed. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small notebook and pencil. If I might have your permission to write to you here, of course. Thea watched as he carefully noted the address, his handwriting surprisingly neat for a man more accustomed to roping cattle than correspondence. And I'll need the Circle M address to reply, she added. Isaac wrote it down for her, along with directions for addressing the letter so it would reach him specifically. The mail coach comes through Sweetwater every Tuesday, he told her. Not the fastest service, but reliable enough. Their farewell on the porch was brief, but charged with unspoken emotions. Isaac took her hand in his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. Thank you for the tour today, Thea said, suddenly shy. It was my pleasure. Isaac's eyes held hers. Take care of yourself, Thea, and don't hesitate to write if you need anything at all. I will. She hesitated, then added softly, Thank you again, Isaac, for everything. He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. No thanks necessary, I'm just glad our paths crossed when they did. As she watched him walk away, Thea felt a curious mixture of loss and anticipation. Their connection had been brief but profound, shaped by extraordinary circumstances that had revealed character rather than concealing it. And while his departure left an unexpected emptiness, the promise of letters offered a bridge across the distance that would separate them. For the first time in years, Thea found herself looking forward to what tomorrow might bring. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Thea's life. Her duties at the boarding house kept her busy from dawn until dusk, but the work was satisfying in its orderliness, and the appreciation it earned from Mrs. Holloway and the boarders. She quickly became known for her excellent cooking and delicate mending, skills that had gone largely unappreciated during her marriage to Jeb. True to Isaac's suggestion, she had visited the dressmaker's shop and secured additional work doing fine stitching that the owner misses. Peterson couldn't manage with her failing eyesight. The arrangement brought in a modest income beyond her room and board, allowing Thea to slowly build a small nest egg and purchase a few necessities: a better hairbrush, some fabric for new undergarments, a warm shawl for the increasingly cold evenings. But the highlight of each week was unquestionably the arrival of Isaac's letters. The first had come just 8 days after his departure, a carefully composed missive that described his journey back to the Circle M and the work awaiting him there. His handwriting was neat but distinctly masculine, the sentences straightforward yet thoughtful. Thea had read it 3 times before sitting down to compose her reply, worried that her own letter would seem dull in comparison. What could she possibly write about her simple days at the boarding house that would interest a man who managed a sprawling ranch? Yet Isaac's second letter had made it clear that he found her daily life fascinating, asking questions about her work and observations that demonstrated genuine interest. "Your description of Mrs. Holloway's battle with the temperamental stove made me laugh out loud," he wrote. The ranch cook, Hector, has a similar relationship with our coffee pot, which he claims has a personal vendetta against him. As autumn deepened into winter, their correspondence grew more personal. Thea found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had never expressed aloud, trusting the privacy of the written page and the distance between them to make such revelations safe. "Sometimes I wake in the night convinced I am still in that cabin," she confessed in one letter. "The relief when I realize I am in my clean little room at Mrs. Holloway's is so overwhelming that I weep. Is it strange to find such joy in simple safety, in knowing that no one will hurt me or berate me before breakfast?" Isaac's reply had been gentle but passionate in its conviction. "There is nothing strange about valuing safety and kindness. These should be the birthright of every person, not luxuries to be marveled at. That you find joy in them speaks to your resilience, not any deficiency in your character." He shared his own vulnerabilities as well, writing of nightmares that still plagued him from his time in the war, of the responsibility he felt for the men who worked under him at the Circle M, of his fear that he would never fully belong anywhere after so many years of wandering. "Mr. Miller treats me like a son," he wrote, "but I sometimes wonder if I am worthy of such regard. I have seen and done things during the war that would horrify him. There are days when I feel like an imposter in this peaceful life I have built." Thea had responded with a fervor that surprised even herself. "We all carry parts of ourselves that we fear others would reject if known, but these shadows do not define us unless we allow them to. Your actions toward Mr. Miller, toward the men you lead, toward a stranger in need at a saloon reveal your true character far more clearly than whatever darkness you carry from the past." As Christmas approached, Sweetwater transformed under a blanket of snow and festive decorations. The general store displayed toys and candies alongside practical goods, and even the saloons hung wreaths on their doors in concession to the season. Mrs. Holloway threw herself into holiday preparations with enthusiasm, enlisting Thea's help in baking an astonishing variety of cookies and pies. The boarding house took on a warm, spicy scent that lingered day and night, making it even more inviting than usual. "We'll have a proper Christmas dinner," Mrs. Holloway declared. "All the boarders, plus a few friends who would otherwise be alone. You'll help me plan the menu, Thea. Your hand with pastry is better than mine ever was." The prospect of a festive gathering both excited and intimidated Thea. Her Christmases with Jeb had been lonely, joyless affairs, marked more by his increased drinking than any celebration. The idea of a house full of people enjoying good food and company seemed almost foreign. "I've invited Isaac as well," Mrs. Holloway mentioned casually as they rolled out dough for mince pies. "He usually spends the holiday at the Circle M, but this year he expressed interest in coming to town." Thea's heart gave a peculiar leap at this news. "Did he? I mean, that's nice, for him not to be alone." Mrs. Holloway's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled by Thea's attempted nonchalance. "Indeed. He mentioned in his note that he has some business in Sweetwater, but I suspect the business might have brown hair and green eyes." "Mrs. Holloway," Thea protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. The older woman laughed. "Child, I've been watching the two of you dance around each other through these letters for months now. The way your face lights up when the mail arrives speaks volumes." "We're friends," Thea insisted, though the words seemed inadequate for the connection she felt with Isaac. "He helped me when I desperately needed it. Of course I value his correspondence." "Of course," Mrs. Holloway agreed, too readily. "Just as he values yours, so much so that he's riding half a day through December snow to deliver his next letter in person." Thea had no response to that observation, but her heart continued its rapid rhythm as she considered the implications. Did Isaac feel the same growing attachment that she experienced? The same anticipation at the thought of seeing each other again? His letters had been warm, even affectionate at times, but he had made no explicit declaration of romantic interest. And why would he? Thea reminded herself sternly. She was still technically married to Jeb, though she had heard nothing from him since their confrontation in the street. She had no property, no family connections, nothing to recommend her as a suitable match for a man of Isaac's position and prospects. Yet hope persisted, fragile but resilient, like the first green shoot after a hard winter. Isaac arrived in Sweetwater 3 days before Christmas, during a brief lull in the snowy weather that had blanketed the region. Thea was helping Mrs. Peterson finish a rush order of children's clothes when the bell above the shop door jingled, announcing a customer. She looked up from her stitching, prepared to offer the standard greeting, and the words died in her throat. Isaac stood in the doorway, snowflakes melting on his broad shoulders, his face reddened from the cold but his eyes warm as they found hers. Isaac. Thea set aside her work and rose, suddenly conscious of her work-worn hands and simple dress. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. The weather looked favorable for travel, so I decided to come early. His gaze hadn't left her face. You look well, Thea, Mrs. Peterson emerged from the back room, her face lighting up at the sight of the visitor. Isaac Morgan, what a pleasant surprise. Are you here for the muffler you ordered? Isaac finally tore his gaze from Thea. Yes, madam, if it's ready and wrapped. The dressmaker bustled to a drawer behind the counter and produced a package tied with red ribbon. Thea did the monogramming herself. Her stitches are finer than mine ever were. Isaac accepted the package with a nod of thanks, then turned back to Thea. When do you finish work today? I thought perhaps we might walk together if you're amenable. I'm sure Thea can leave now, Mrs. Peterson interjected before Thea could respond. We're nearly finished, and it's almost closing time anyway. 15 minutes later, bundled in her shawl and a borrowed muffler, Thea found herself walking beside Isaac through the snowy streets of Sweetwater. The late afternoon sun cast long blue shadows across the white landscape, and their breath formed clouds in the crisp air. You really do look well, Isaac said after they had gone a short distance. Sweetwater agrees with you. Freedom agrees with me, Thea corrected gently, and having purpose. Mrs. Holloway and Mrs. Peterson have been very kind, I'm glad. Isaac's gloved hand brushed against hers, perhaps accidentally. Your letters suggested as much, but it's good to see the evidence with my own eyes. And you? Thea studied his profile, noting the relaxed set of his shoulders, so different from the tension he had carried during their first meeting. How are things at the Circle M? Busy, but good. Winter is actually one of our calmer seasons, with most of the cattle settled in the protected valleys and less risk of rustlers in the snow. Isaac guided her around a particularly deep drift. I've had more time for reading in the evenings. Your recommendation of Mr. Dickens was excellent, by the way. They continued in this vein, exchanging news and observations as they walked, the conversation flowing as easily as it did in their letters, despite the months of physical separation. Thea found herself relaxing into his company, the initial nervousness giving way to genuine pleasure at being in his presence again. I have something for you, Isaac said as they paused near the small town square, where a large pine tree had been decorated with paper chains and candles for the holiday. A Christmas gift, though you can open it now if you'd like. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with the same red ribbon as the one from the dressmaker's shop. Thea accepted it with surprise. I didn't expect. That is, I haven't prepared anything for you, she admitted, embarrassed. Your company is gift enough, Isaac assured her. Open it. Thea carefully untied the ribbon and unfolded the paper to reveal a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she discovered it was a journal, the pages creamy and blank, waiting to be filled. I noticed in your letters that you have a gift for description, Isaac explained. I thought you might enjoy having a place to record your thoughts more permanently than in letters to me. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Thea deeply. It's perfect, she said sincerely. Thank you, Isaac. There's something else. He hesitated, then reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded document. This arrived at the Circle M last week. It's addressed to you, but since you mentioned not knowing where your brothers are, Mr. Miller thought it might be important and suggested I bring it when I came to town. Puzzled, Thea accepted the paper. It was indeed addressed to her, care of the Circle M Ranch, though her name was written as Mrs. Thea Warren rather than using Jeb's first name as well, which was unusual. Breaking the seal, she unfolded the document and began to read, her breath caught as the meaning of the legal language became clear. It's divorce papers, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jeb has filed for divorce in California. Isaac's expression was carefully neutral. Is that welcome news? Yes, Thea breathed, scanning the document again to confirm she hadn't misunderstood. Yes, it's very welcome, I never thought. That is, I assumed I would be tied to him legally forever, even though he sold me like chattel. The law sometimes works in unexpected ways, Isaac observed. California has more progressive divorce statutes than many territories, and it appears he's citing abandonment as the cause, which is ironic but convenient. Thea looked up from the paper, a wild hope beginning to bloom in her chest. This means I'll be free, truly free. You already were, Isaac said quietly, but yes, legally free as well once you sign and return these papers. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. Thea carefully refolded the document, her mind racing with implications and possibilities that had seemed impossible just minutes before. We should celebrate, Isaac suggested, his tone lightening. Perhaps dinner at the hotel restaurant. It's much improved since my last visit to town. I'd like that, Thea agreed, though I should let Mrs. Holloway know not to expect me. The evening that followed had a dreamlike quality for Thea. The hotel restaurant was decorated festively for the season, with candles on each table and sprigs of evergreen arranged around the room. Isaac ordered a bottle of wine to accompany their meal, a luxury Thea had rarely experienced, and proposed a toast to new beginnings. Their conversation ranged widely. From books they had both read to Isaac's plans for expanding the horse breeding program at the Circle M. Thea found herself laughing more than she had in years, drawn out of her usual reserve by Isaac's attentive interest and genuine respect for her opinions. Mr. Miller is considering retiring next year, Isaac mentioned as they lingered over dessert. He's offered to sell me a partnership in the ranch. Thea's eyebrows rose in surprise. Isaac, that's wonderful. You've certainly earned it with your years of service. It would mean taking on considerable debt, he cautioned. But yes, it's an opportunity I never expected to have. A chance to build something lasting, to have a real stake in the future of the land I've come to love. You'll do it then, Isaac's expression grew thoughtful. I'm strongly considering it. There are other factors to consider as well. Something in his tone made Thea's heart beat faster. What sort of factors? Personal ones. Isaac met her gaze directly. A partnership in the ranch would put me in a position to consider a more settled life, the kind of life that might include a family of my own. The implication hung in the air between them, delicate as a soap bubble. Thea found herself unable to look away from his face, searching for confirmation that he meant what she thought what she hoped he meant. Isaac, she began, but he shook his head slightly. I'm not asking anything of you tonight, Thea. It would be premature with your divorce not yet finalized. And you deserve time to consider what you truly want for your future, without pressure or obligation. His voice was gentle but firm. I just wanted you to know that my interest in you extends beyond friendship, should you find yourself inclined to reciprocate. Relief and disappointment warred within Thea. She appreciated his consideration, his unwillingness to rush her into decisions when her legal situation remained unresolved. Yet part of her wished he had been less restrained, that he had declared his feelings more openly. Thank you for your honesty, she finally said, and for your patience. Both are valued more than I can express. Isaac's smile was warm with understanding. We have time, Thea. For now, let's enjoy the holiday and each other's company without the weight of expectations. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, their conversation returning to lighter topics. When Isaac escorted her back to the boarding house, his hand on her elbow was a steadying presence in the snowy darkness. At Mrs. Holloway's door, they paused. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the front window, left burning to guide Thea home. Thank you for a lovely evening, Thea said, suddenly shy again, And for bringing the papers, my pleasure. Isaac's face was partially shadowed in the dim light, but his eyes were intent on hers. May I call on you tomorrow, perhaps in the afternoon? I'd like that. Thea hesitated, then added impulsively, I'm very glad you came to Sweetwater for Christmas, Isaac. So am I. His voice was low, intimate in the quiet night. More than I can say. For a moment, Thea thought he might kiss her. He leaned slightly forward, his gaze dropping to her lips. Then he straightened, propriety reasserting itself. Good night, Thea. Sleep well. Good night, Isaac. As she slipped inside the warm house, Thea pressed a hand to her racing heart. For all that had remained unspoken, she felt as if something profound had shifted between them tonight. The future that had seemed so bleak just months ago now shimmered with promise, like the first light of dawn after the darkest night. Christmas at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house was everything Thea had hoped for and more. The long table in the dining room groaned under the weight of the feast they had prepared: roast goose, mashed potatoes, candied yams, fresh bread, 3 different vegetables, and an array of pies and cookies for dessert. The boarders had contributed as well, bringing bottles of wine and small gifts for their hostess and each other. Isaac arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, dressed in his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his expression slightly nervous as Mrs. Holloway ushered him in from the cold. Thea felt her own flutter of nerves as their eyes met across the crowded parlor. She had spent extra time on her appearance, wearing the new dress she had made from Fabric Mrs. Peterson had given her as a Christmas bonus a deep burgundy wool that complemented her coloring and fit better than any garment she had owned before. You look beautiful, Isaac murmured when he reached her side. That color suits you. Thank you. Thea accepted the small nosegay of winter greenery and dried flowers he presented, touched by the gesture. Mrs. Peterson helped me with the pattern. It's the first dress I've made entirely for myself in years. It was worth the effort. His admiring gaze made her cheeks warm. Dinner was a lively affair, with stories and laughter flowing as freely as the wine. Isaac sat beside Thea, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they passed dishes back and forth. The casual contact sent little shivers through her each time, a physical awareness that was both thrilling and unsettling after so long without gentle touch. After the meal, several of the boarders produced musical instruments: a fiddle, a harmonica, a small accordion, and began playing Christmas carols. The furniture in the parlor was pushed back to create space for dancing, and Mrs. Holloway encouraged everyone to participate. May I have this dance? Isaac asked, extending his hand to Thea as the musicians struck up a lively reel. I'm afraid I'm not very practiced, Thea admitted. Jeb never. I'll lead, Isaac assured her. Just follow my movements. His hand was warm and solid around hers as he guided her into the dance. Thea felt awkward at first, her feet refusing to follow the unfamiliar patterns, but Isaac was patient and surprisingly graceful for such a large man. By the second dance, she had relaxed enough to enjoy the movement and the music, laughing when she made mistakes rather than tensing in anticipation of criticism. You're a natural, Isaac told her as they paused to catch their breath after a particularly energetic number. You just needed the right partner. The simple statement carried a weight of meaning that made Thea's heart swell. Perhaps that's true of many things in life, she replied softly. Isaac's eyes darkened with emotion. Perhaps it is. The evening continued with games, more music, and the exchange of small gifts. Thea had managed to knit a pair of warm gloves for Mrs. Holloway and had contributed baked goods for the other boarders. For Isaac, she had embroidered a handkerchief with his initials, a modest gift but one that represented hours of careful work in the evenings after her regular duties were complete. It's exquisite, he said when she presented it to him, running his thumb over the precise stitches. Thank you, Thea. I'll treasure it. It's nothing compared to the journal, she demurred. It's not nothing, Isaac contradicted gently. It's your time and skill given freely. That makes it precious. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Isaac lingered, helping to move furniture back into place and carry dishes to the kitchen despite Mrs. Holloway's protests that he was a guest and shouldn't be working. Nonsense, he replied good-naturedly. I was raised to pitch in where hands are needed. Finally, only Isaac remained, standing with Thea on the front porch as they had 2 nights before. The sky was clear, stars glittering in the cold darkness, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. When will you return to the Circle M? Thea asked, reluctant to end the evening but aware that he had responsibilities elsewhere. The day after tomorrow, Isaac replied. Mr. Miller gave me leave for the holiday, but we have cattle to tend regardless of the date on the calendar. Of course. Thea tried to hide her disappointment. Will you? That is, how long before you might return to Sweetwater? Isaac's expression softened. I'll be back in 3 weeks. Mr. Miller has business with the bank that he's entrusted to me. He hesitated, then added, and I hope to have an answer from you then regarding what we discussed at dinner the other night. Thea's breath caught. You mean? I mean my interest in you, Isaac confirmed, his voice low and serious, in a future that might include both of us together. Isaac, Thea began, but he shook his head. No need to answer now. The papers for your divorce will need time to be processed, and you should have space to consider what you truly want. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. I've waited this long. I can wait a bit longer for the right answer. And if my answer is yes, Thea whispered, unable to contain the question that burned within her, Isaac's smile was slow and full of promise. Then we'll have much to discuss about what comes next. Impulsively, Thea rose on her tiptoes and pressed a quick, chaste kiss to his cheek. Merry Christmas, Isaac. For a moment he looked startled, then deeply pleased. Merry Christmas, Thea. His voice had roughened slightly. Until next time. The 3 weeks that followed were both the longest and shortest of Thea's life. She threw herself into her work with renewed energy, taking on additional sewing projects and helping Mrs. Holloway prepare the boarding house for the new year. In the evenings, she wrote in the journal Isaac had given her, sorting through her thoughts and feelings about the unexpected turn her life had taken. The divorce papers had been signed and returned to California via the mail coach, the legal machinery now in motion to sever the last tie binding her to Jeb Warren. Thea felt no regret, only a profound relief that soon she would be truly independent, free to make her own choices about her future. And increasingly, those thoughts of the future included Isaac. His letters continued to arrive weekly, their tone warm but respectful, never presuming upon the understanding they had reached at Christmas. He wrote of the ranch, of books he was reading, of his growing certainty that taking Mr. Miller's offer of partnership was the right decision. The land feels like home in a way nowhere else has, he confessed in one letter. I can envision growing old here, watching seasons change across the valley, building something that might outlast me. It's a good dream, but an incomplete one without someone to share it. Thea read those words over and over, allowing herself to imagine the life he was describing. A home of her own after years of making do in Jeb's neglected cabin. A partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Perhaps in time, children to fill the rooms with laughter and purpose. It was a vision so far removed from her expectations of just a few months ago that it sometimes seemed like a fantasy. Yet Isaac himself was real, his letters tangible proof of his existence and interest, his actions evidence of his character and intentions. By the time the 3 weeks had passed, Thea had reached a decision. It wasn't a difficult one in the end. Her heart and mind had aligned on the matter with surprising harmony, leaving her with a sense of quiet certainty that surpassed the nervous anticipation she might have expected. Isaac arrived in Sweetwater on a clear, cold January day, the winter sun lending a crystalline quality to the landscape. Thea watched from the window of Mrs. Holloway's parlor as he approached on horseback, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. Mrs. Holloway appeared at her shoulder, a knowing smile on her face. You might want to put on your good shawl, dear, and perhaps take a walk with that young man. The parlor isn't the place for the conversation you two need to have. Thea blushed, but didn't deny the older woman's implication. I'm that transparent, am I? Only to someone who's seen as many love stories begin as I have, Mrs. Holloway replied affectionately. Now go on. Don't keep him waiting. Isaac's face lit up when Thea met him at the door, wrapped in her shawl and ready for the suggested walk. I was hoping you might be free this afternoon, he said, offering his arm. It's cold but beautiful out, Mrs. Holloway practically pushed me out the door, Thea admitted with a small laugh. I think she's tired of watching me wait for the mail coach every Tuesday. A smile tugged at Isaac's lips. I've been accused of similar behavior at the ranch. Hector claims I'm wearing a path to the road with my pacing on mail days. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their breaths forming clouds in the cold air. Thea was content to simply be in his presence again, to feel the solid strength of his arm beneath her hand, to match her steps to his longer stride. Eventually, they reached the small park at the edge of town where they had sat during his first tour of Sweetwater. The creek was partially frozen now, ice forming intricate patterns along its edges while the center still flowed, dark and swift. I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, Thea said as they settled on the same bench now cleared of snow. About your interest in me, in a future together. Isaac's expression grew serious, his eyes intent on her face. And what conclusions have you reached? Thea took a deep breath, her heart racing despite her certainty. That I would like very much to explore that possibility with you, Isaac, if your offer still stands. The tension in his shoulders eased visibly. It does, he confirmed, his voice warm with emotion. It very much does. My divorce won't be final for some time yet, Thea cautioned, and I have very little to bring to a marriage beyond myself and my skills. You are more than enough, Isaac said firmly. As for the timing, I'm a patient man. We can have a proper courtship while the legal matters resolve themselves. He hesitated, then added, I should be clear about what I'm proposing, Thea. I want to court you with the intention of marriage, if you'll have me, to build a life together at the Circle M as partners in every sense. The directness of his statement left no room for misunderstanding. This was no casual dalliance he was suggesting, but a lifetime commitment. Thea felt a surge of gratitude for his honesty and the respect it demonstrated. I would like that very much, she said simply, to be courted by you, Isaac Morgan, and to see where it leads us. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. May I? He began, then seemed to reconsider his words. That is, would it be acceptable if I kissed you, just once to seal our understanding? Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold air. Yes, she whispered. I'd like that. Isaac moved closer on the bench, one gloved hand coming up to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, his eyes seeking confirmation until the last moment before they closed. The kiss was soft, almost reverent, his lips warm against hers in the winter chill. Thea had been kissed before, but never like this, never with such tender care, as if she were something precious to be cherished rather than possessed. She leaned into the contact, her hand finding his shoulder for balance as a sweet warmth spread through her chest. When they parted, Isaac's eyes remained closed for a moment longer, as if he were committing the sensation to memory. When he looked at her again, the emotion in his gaze made her breath catch. I've wanted to do that since Christmas, he admitted, his voice slightly rough. Perhaps even since that first day at Mrs. Holloway's, though it would have been highly improper to acknowledge it then. Thea smiled, feeling strangely bold in the wake of the kiss. I might have welcomed it even then, she confessed. You were, different from any man I'd known, kind when you had no reason to be. I had every reason, Isaac corrected gently. Your courage, your dignity in the face of such treatment, they called to something in me from the first moment. I admired you long before I allowed myself to recognize deeper feelings. His words warmed her more effectively than any fire could have. To be seen, to be valued for her character rather than her utility or appearance, was a gift Thea had never expected to receive. What happens now? She asked, practical concerns reasserting themselves despite the glow of the moment. Now we court properly, Isaac replied. I'll call on you when I'm in town, write to you when I'm at the ranch. We'll get to know each other better, build a foundation for the future we both want. He took her hand in his. And when your divorce is final, if you're still certain, I'll ask you a different question. I'll be certain, Thea assured him, squeezing his fingers. But I appreciate your caution. It's one of the things I admire about you, your consideration for what's right, even when it might be easier to take shortcuts." They remained in the park until the winter sun began to sink toward the horizon, talking of practical matters now, how often Isaac could reasonably visit Sweetwater, when Thea might be able to see the Circle M, what their courtship would look like given the constraints of distance, and her continued employment with Mrs. Holloway. "Mr. Miller has invited you to visit the ranch whenever you'd like," Isaac mentioned as they walked back toward the boarding house. "He's curious about the woman who's been occupying so much of my attention these past months." "I'd like to meet him," Thea said. "From your letters, he sounds like a remarkable man." "He is. And Mrs. Miller will adore you. She's been after me for years to settle down with a nice girl, as she puts it." Isaac's expression was fond as he spoke of his employers. "They're the closest thing to family I have." "Then their approval matters," Thea observed. "I'll do my best to make a good impression." "Just be yourself," Isaac advised. "That's more than enough to win them over, as it was with me." At Mrs. Holloway's door, they paused again, both reluctant to end their time together. "When must you return to the ranch?" Thea asked. "The day after tomorrow. Mr. Miller's business with the bank shouldn't take more than a day to resolve." Isaac's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, the gentle touch sending shivers up her arm despite their gloves. "But I'll be back in Sweetwater within the month, more frequently if the weather allows." "I'll count the days," Thea admitted, "and treasure your letters in between." Isaac's expression softened, "as I will yours." He leaned down to press another gentle kiss to her lips, this one briefer but no less sweet than the first. "Good night, Thea. Dream well." "Good night, Isaac." As she watched him walk away, Thea felt a certainty settle in her heart that had nothing to do with legal documents or formal promises. Whatever the future held, she would face it with this good man beside her, not as a possession to be bartered or a burden to be endured, but as a partner chosen freely and cherished completely. For a woman who had once been sold for whiskey, it was a transformation beyond imagining. Yet here she stood on the threshold of a new life, her heart full of hope and the taste of Isaac's kiss still warm on her lips. The future beckoned, bright with promise. Spring came to Wyoming territory in fits and starts, snow giving way to mud, then green shoots, then occasionally more snow before the cycle began again. By April, however, the transformation was undeniable. The creek that ran through Sweetwater swelled with snowmelt, wildflowers dotted the hills, and the days lengthened noticeably, bringing warmth and renewed activity to the town. For Thea, the changing season mirrored the transformation in her own life. Her divorce had been finalized in March, the official document arriving via mail coach on a blustery day that had felt more symbolic than Thea could express. She was legally free at last, her connection to Jeb Warren severed completely. Her courtship with Isaac had progressed steadily through the winter months, each visit and letter deepening their understanding of one another. He had been true to his word, treating her with a respect and consideration that never failed to touch her heart. Their conversations ranged from practical discussions of ranch management to philosophical debates about books they had both read, each exchange revealing new facets of compatibility and shared values. In February, Isaac had brought her to the Circle M for the first time, introducing her to Mr. and Mrs. Miller, and showing her the land he had come to love. The main house was larger than Thea had expected, a solid 2-story structure built of local timber with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. The bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings formed a neat compound, while corrals and pastures stretched beyond, all set against the backdrop of mountains still capped with snow. "It's beautiful," Thea had breathed, taking in the sweeping vista from the hill above the main house. "I can see why you love it here. It grows on you," Isaac had agreed, his arm around her waist as they surveyed what might one day be their shared domain. "The winters are harsh, but spring makes it all worthwhile." The Millers had welcomed her warmly, Mrs. Miller in particular taking an immediate liking to Thea. "About time Isaac found himself a sensible woman," she had declared after dinner on that first visit. "I was beginning to think he'd marry that horse of his before he'd bring home a bride." Mr. Miller had admonished, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. You'll embarrass our guest. Nonsense. Thea knows I'm teasing. Mrs. Miller had patted Thea's hand affectionately. But in all seriousness, my dear, it's a pleasure to see Isaac so happy. You've been good for him. Thea had returned to Sweetwater from that visit with a clearer vision of what her future might hold, not just marriage to Isaac, but becoming part of the close-knit community of the Circle M, with its rhythm of seasons and the satisfaction of shared purpose. Now, as April bloomed around her, Thea found herself in Mrs. Holloway's garden, planting the vegetables that would feed the boarding house through the coming summer and fall. The work was peaceful, allowing her mind to wander as her hands pressed seeds into the warming soil. Isaac would be arriving tomorrow for a week-long stay in Sweetwater, ostensibly to help with repairs to the livery stable that had been damaged in a late winter storm. But Thea knew his visit had another purpose as well. With her divorce final and their courtship having progressed through the winter, the time had come for the conversation they had both been anticipating since January. "You're a million miles away, child," Mrs. Holloway observed, settling onto the garden bench with her mending basket. "Those carrots won't grow any faster for all your daydreaming." Thea smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "Just thinking about tomorrow." "About Isaac's arrival, you mean?" Mrs. Holloway's expression was knowing. "I expect he'll have something important to ask you this visit." "Perhaps," Thea acknowledged, though in truth there was little doubt in her mind. Isaac's last letter had hinted strongly at his intentions, asking her to keep the evening of his arrival free for a private dinner. "Well, don't keep the poor man waiting too long with your answer, Mrs. Holloway advised. "He's been patient as a saint these past months." "I don't intend to torment him," Thea assured her, unable to suppress a small laugh at the thought. "When the question comes, my answer will be ready." Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. "Good. You two are well suited. Anyone can see that. And it's time you had a home of your own, though I'll miss your help around here something fierce." A pang of guilt touched Thea at the reminder that her marriage would mean leaving Mrs. Holloway short-handed. "I've been thinking about that," she admitted. "Mary Williams's younger sister is looking for work, and she's a good cook from what Mary says. Perhaps she could take my place." "Already planning for the transition, are you?" Mrs. Holloway's tone was teasing but fond. "Don't you worry about me, Thea. I managed this place for 15 years before you arrived, and I'll manage after you're gone. Your happiness is what matters now." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to Thea's eyes. After so many years of being valued primarily for her utility, first by her father, then by Jeb, the unconditional support of friends like Mrs. Holloway still had the power to move her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I wouldn't be where I am without your kindness, Mrs. Holloway waved away her gratitude with characteristic briskness. "Nonsense. You made your own way with hard work and good sense. Now finish those carrots before the light fades, and then we'll talk about what you're wearing for this special dinner tomorrow." Isaac arrived the following afternoon, right on schedule, driving a wagon rather than riding Maverick as he usually did. Thea watched from the dressmaker's shop window as he secured the horses outside the hotel, her heart beating a little faster at the sight of his tall figure moving with easy confidence through the busy street. "Go on," Mrs. Peterson urged, noticing her distraction. "We're finished here, and that young man of yours is clearly eager to see you." Thea didn't need to be told twice. She gathered her shawl and reticule, thanked Mrs. Peterson for the day's work, and stepped out into the pleasant spring afternoon. Isaac spotted her immediately, his face lighting up as he crossed the street to meet her. "Thea," he greeted, taking her hands in his larger ones. "You're a sight for sore eyes after 3 weeks of nothing but cowhands and Mr. Miller for company." Thea laughed, squeezing his fingers. "Are you implying that I'm more pleasant to look at than Hector the cook? I'm flattered. You should be. Hector has a face like a craggy mountain and a disposition to match." Isaac's eyes crinkled with humor, then softened as they took in her appearance. "You look beautiful. That blue ribbon suits you." Thea touched the ribbon she had woven through her braided hair that morning, pleased that he had noticed the small adornment. "Thank you. How was your journey?" "Uneventful, thankfully. The roads are finally drying out after all that spring rain." Isaac offered his arm. "May I walk you back to Mrs. Holloway's? I've arranged for dinner at 7 if that suits you. It does. Thea placed her hand on his arm, falling into step beside him. Where are we dining? The hotel? A mysterious smile curved Isaac's lips. It's a surprise. We're something comfortable for walking, though. It's not far, but not in town either. Curiosity piqued. Thea tried to imagine what Isaac might have planned. Now I'm intrigued. Will I need my shawl? The evenings are still cool. Bring it just in case, though I promise to keep you warm if needed. Isaac's tone was teasing but held an undercurrent that sent a pleasant shiver down Thea's spine. Their courtship had been proper in every respect, but as the months passed, an awareness had grown between them that went beyond the chaste kisses and hand-holding they had allowed themselves. At Mrs. Holloway's door, Isaac paused. I need to attend to a few matters before this evening. I'll return at 7. I'll be ready, Thea promised. His kiss was brief but tender, a promise of the evening to come. As Thea watched him stride away, anticipation coiled within her, not just for whatever surprise he had planned for dinner, but for the question she was almost certain would follow. When Isaac returned that evening, Thea was waiting in the parlor, dressed in her best day dress of deep blue wool with a white lace collar. She had pinned her hair up in a more elaborate style than usual, with a few soft curls framing her face, and had added the small pearl earrings Mrs. Holloway had lent her for the occasion. You look. Isaac seemed momentarily at a loss for words as he took in her appearance. Radiant, Thea felt a blush warm her cheeks at the naked admiration in his gaze. Thank you, you're quite handsome yourself. It was true, he wore a well-tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, with a crisp white shirt and dark tie that gave him an air of formal elegance she rarely saw. Mrs. Holloway bustled in from the kitchen, beaming at the pair of them. Don't you two make a picture? Now off with you, and don't hurry back on my account. The door will be unlocked whenever you return. The knowing glint in the older woman's eye suggested she had a good idea of what the evening might hold, but Thea was too excited to be embarrassed by the implication. She took Isaac's offered arm, bid Mrs. Holloway good night, and stepped out into the soft spring evening. To her surprise, the wagon Isaac had arrived in was waiting at the curb, now outfitted with a cushioned seat and what appeared to be a basket secured in the back. A picnic. Thea guessed as Isaac helped her up onto the seat. Of sorts, he replied, climbing up beside her and taking the reins. The location is what makes it special, not just the food. They traveled out of town, following the main road for about a mile before turning onto a smaller track that wound up into the hills overlooking Sweetwater. The evening was perfect for such an excursion, warm enough to be comfortable, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of new growth and distant wildflowers. The sun was low on the horizon, painting the landscape in gold and amber hues that took Thea's breath away. It's beautiful up here, she said as they climbed higher, the town gradually shrinking below them. I've never ventured this far from Sweetwater. Few people do, which is why I thought you might enjoy it. Isaac guided the horses around a bend in the track, then drew them to a halt in a small clearing that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. We've arrived. The spot he had chosen was perfect, a grassy area sheltered by pines on 3 sides, but open to the view on the 4th, with a flat rock formation that would serve admirably as a table for their meal. As Isaac helped Thea down from the wagon, she noticed that someone had already been here to prepare. A blanket was spread on the grass, weighted down with stones at the corners, and a small stack of firewood was arranged nearby, ready to be lit. You've thought of everything, Thea observed, touched by the careful planning evident in the scene. I had some help, Isaac admitted, retrieving the basket from the wagon. Mrs. Miller suggested the blanket and prepared most of the food, and Mr. Jenkins at the livery offered the use of his wagon when I explained what I had in mind. Conspirators everywhere, Thea teased, settling onto the blanket as Isaac began unpacking the basket. Should I be concerned about the entire town knowing our business? Isaac's smile was rueful. In a place like Sweetwater, impossible to avoid, but they mean well. He pulled out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Mrs. Miller insisted we needed proper glassware for the occasion, said tin cups wouldn't do. The meal that followed was simple but delicious: cold chicken, fresh bread, early spring vegetables from the Circle MTK's kitchen garden, and a berry tart for dessert. They ate as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the valley and painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. As they finished the wine, Isaac built a small fire to ward off the evening chill that was beginning to descend with the fading light. The flames cast a warm glow over the clearing, creating an intimate circle of light that seemed to separate them from the rest of the world. "Thank you for this," Thea said as they sat side by side watching the fire dance. "It's been a perfect evening." "It's not over yet," Isaac replied, his voice low and serious. He reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. "Thea, there's something I need to ask you." Though she had been expecting this moment, Thea felt her heart begin to race, a fluttering sensation in her chest that was equal parts excitement and nervous anticipation. "Yes," Isaac took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness, your intelligence and humor, it's been a privilege I never expected to have." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "When we met, you were in a desperate situation, and I've tried to be careful not to take advantage of that, to give you time and space to find your footing without pressure from me." "You've been nothing but respectful," Thea assured him, squeezing his hand. "More than I could have asked for." Isaac nodded, relief flickering across his features. "I'm glad you feel that way, because now that your divorce is final, now that you've had time to establish yourself in Sweetwater and consider your options, I find myself unable to wait any longer to ask." He released her hand and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "Thea, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Opening the box, he revealed a ring, a delicate gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was beautiful in its simplicity, elegant without being ostentatious, exactly the sort of ring Thea would have chosen for herself. Emotion welled up within her, a happiness so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Isaac. I would be honored to be your wife." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, transforming his serious features with joy. With slightly trembling fingers, he removed the ring from its box and slipped it onto her left hand, where it fit perfectly. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice rough with emotion. "One of the few things I kept after she passed. Mr. Miller has been holding it in his safe at the ranch for years." "It's beautiful," Thea said sincerely, admiring how the firelight caught the stones. "I'll treasure it always." Isaac drew her close, his arms encircling her with gentle strength. "I love you, Thea," he murmured against her hair. "I think I began falling in love with you that first day in the saloon when you showed such dignity in the face of degradation, and every day since has only deepened that feeling." "I love you too," Thea replied, the words coming easily now that they could finally be spoken aloud. "You've shown me what love should be: patient, kind, respectful. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone." When their lips met, the kiss was different from the careful ones they had shared before, deeper, more passionate, a promise of the intimacy to come in their marriage. Thea wound her arms around Isaac's neck, pressing closer as his hands splayed across her back, holding her as if she were precious beyond measure. They stayed in the clearing until the fire burned low, talking of practical matters now: when they would marry, where they would live, how soon Thea could move to the Circle M. Isaac had already discussed the situation with Mr. Miller, who had offered them the use of a small cabin on the property until a more permanent arrangement could be made. "It's not grand," Isaac cautioned. "Just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it's weather-tight and private, and we can add to it as needed." "It sounds perfect," Thea assured him. "After Jeb's cabin, anything clean and well-maintained would be a palace." "Mr. Miller has also agreed to the partnership we discussed," Isaac added. 10% ownership to start, with the option to increase my share over time as I can afford it. "It means we'll be tied to the Circle M for the foreseeable future, but with a real stake in its success." "I can't imagine a better place to build our life together," Thea said sincerely. "From what I've seen, it's a beautiful property with good people." "The best," Isaac agreed. "And they already consider you part of the family." Mrs. Miller has been planning what she calls welcome festivities since your first visit. Thea laughed, imagining the energetic older woman in full organizational mode. Should I be worried? Possibly. Isaac's eyes crinkled with amusement. She tends toward enthusiasm in these matters, but her heart's in the right place. As they packed up the remains of their picnic and doused the fire, Thea felt a sense of completion, of rightness, that she had never experienced before. The journey from that terrible day in the saloon to this moment on the hilltop had been unexpected in every way. Yet somehow it felt inevitable, as if all paths in her life had been leading to Isaac and the future they would build together. The wagon ride back to Sweetwater was peaceful, the night sky ablaze with stars above them as they traveled the quiet road. Thea leaned against Isaac's solid warmth, her left hand resting on his arm where the new ring caught occasional glints of moonlight. When would you like to marry? Isaac asked as the lights of town came into view. I don't want to rush you, but I admit I'm eager to begin our life together properly. Thea considered the question. I don't need a grand wedding or extensive preparations. Perhaps a month. That would give me time to finish my obligations to Mrs. Holloway and Mrs. Peterson and to prepare a few things for our home. A month sounds reasonable, Isaac agreed. The first Saturday in May, the weather should be settled by then, making travel easier for anyone we might want to invite. Perfect. Thea smiled up at him, still slightly disbelieving that this good man was to be her husband. A spring wedding for a new beginning. Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple, his arm tightening around her waist. The first of many new beginnings we'll share, I hope. The month that followed passed in a whirl of activity. Thea divided her time between her regular duties at the boarding house and preparations for her new life at the Circle M. There was a trousseau to assemble, modest though it would be, and countless decisions to make about everything from wedding arrangements to household necessities. Mrs. Holloway and Mrs. Peterson joined forces to help, organizing a bride's tea, where the women of Sweetwater presented Thea with useful gifts for her new home linens, kitchen implements, a beautiful quilt pieced by several ladies working together, and other practical items that would make the small cabin more comfortable. You've become dear to many here, Mrs. Holloway explained when Thea expressed surprise at the generosity. They want to show their support for your happiness. Isaac returned to the Circle M after a week in Sweetwater, needed at the ranch as spring having reached its peak. His letters during their separation were full of plans and practical arrangements, but also contained tender expressions of love and anticipation that made Thea blush when she read them in the privacy of her room. I've begun expanding the cabin, he wrote in mid-April. Added a proper bedroom so the main room can serve as our living area. Mr. Miller thinks I'm overambitious, but I want everything to be ready for you. This will be a true home, Thea, not just shelter. A place where we can build our future together. The first Saturday in May dawned clear and mild, as if nature itself approved of the union about to take place. The wedding was to be held in Sweetwater's small church, with a reception following at the boarding house. It would be a simple affair. Neither Thea nor Isaac had family to invite, though Thea had sent word to her brothers out of a sense of obligation rather than any real expectation that they would attend. Mrs. Holloway had insisted on providing Thea with a proper wedding dress, enlisting Mrs. Peterson's help to create a gown of ivory silk with delicate lace trim. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day, she declared when Thea protested the expense. Consider it my gift to you both. The result was more elegant than anything Thea had ever owned, modest but flattering, with a high collar and long sleeves in the current fashion, but cut to emphasize her slender waist and the graceful line of her neck. When she donned it on the morning of the wedding, with her hair arranged in soft curls beneath a simple veil, the reflection in the mirror was almost unrecognizable, a confident, radiant woman, rather than the desperate, frightened creature who had arrived in Sweetwater 8 months earlier. Oh, my dear, Mrs. Holloway breathed when Thea descended the stairs. You're absolutely lovely. Isaac won't know what hit him. The church was filled with well-wishers, the boarders, Mrs. Peterson and her family, the shopkeepers Thea had come to know through her work, and a contingent from the Circle M including Mr. and Mrs. Miller, and several of the ranch hands who had made the journey to town for the occasion. Isaac waited at the altar, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his expression a mixture of nervousness and joy that melted into pure adoration when Thea appeared at the back of the church. For a moment, everything else faded away: the gathered guests, the flowers decorating the small sanctuary, even the minister waiting to perform the ceremony. There was only Isaac, his eyes locked with hers, his love a tangible force that drew her forward. Mr. Miller had offered to escort Thea down the aisle in the absence of her father or brothers, a gesture that had touched her deeply. Now he patted her hand where it rested on his arm, a reassuring pressure that steadied her nerves. "Ready, my dear," he murmured. Thea nodded, unable to tear her gaze from Isaac. More than ready. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, the traditional vows taking on profound significance for a woman who had once been treated as property rather than a person. When Isaac promised to love, honor, and cherish her, his voice was firm with conviction, leaving no doubt of his sincerity. "I, Thea, take you, Isaac, to be my lawfully wedded husband," she responded, her own voice clear and steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." The words were a covenant she entered with her whole heart, a promise she intended to keep through whatever life might bring. As Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, Thea felt the last shadows of her past recede, replaced by the bright certainty of the future they would build together. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." He smiled at Isaac. "You may kiss your bride." Isaac's kiss was gentle but contained a hint of the passion he typically kept carefully restrained in public. As they turned to face the congregation, now officially Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, a spontaneous cheer erupted from the gathered friends and well-wishers. The reception at Mrs. Holloway's was a joyful affair, with abundant food, music provided by several of the boarders, and more congratulations than Thea could properly acknowledge. She moved through the crowded rooms on Isaac's arm, scarcely able to believe that this celebration was for them, that these people had come together to share in their happiness. Overwhelmed. Isaac murmured as they found a moment of relative privacy in the kitchen, where he had gone to fetch her a glass of punch. "A little," Thea admitted. "I never expected so many people to care about our marriage." "You've made more of an impression on this town than you realize," Isaac said, his eyes warm with pride. "And the Circle M crew are here as much for the free food as for me, I suspect." Thea laughed, leaning into his solid presence. "Don't sell yourself short, husband. Hector told me earlier that he'd never seen the ranch run so smoothly as under your management." "Husband," Isaac repeated, savoring the word. "I don't think I'll ever tire of hearing you call me that." "Good, because I intend to use it frequently." Thea reached up to straighten his slightly askew tie, the simple domestic gesture feeling both novel and right. "When do we leave for the ranch?" "Whenever you're ready," Isaac replied. "The wagon is packed with your things and Maverick is saddled for me. We can stay as long as you'd like, or slip away when the celebration begins to wind down." The thought of finally being alone with Isaac, of beginning their life together properly, sent a flutter of anticipation through Thea's stomach. Perhaps another hour. "I wouldn't want to seem ungrateful by leaving too early. An hour it is." Isaac pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "Then home to the Circle M." Home. The word resonated within Thea with a sweetness she had almost forgotten was possible. After years of survival, of making do in places that offered shelter but never belonging, she was going home not just to a physical location, but to a life shared with a man who valued her for exactly who she was. As promised, they departed the reception while it was still in full swing, amid good-natured teasing and heartfelt well wishes. Thea changed from her wedding gown into a practical traveling dress, hugged Mrs. Holloway with genuine affection, and climbed into the wagon beside Isaac for the journey to their new life. The ride to the Circle M took several hours, the wagon moving at a leisurely pace along roads still showing the effects of spring rains. Isaac pointed out landmarks as they traveled, his obvious love for the land evident in every description. Thea listened contentedly, already beginning to see the territory through his eyes not as harsh wilderness, but as home. They arrived at the ranch as sunset painted the western sky in brilliant orange and gold. The main house was dark, the Millers having remained in town for the night after the wedding, but lamps glowed in the bunkhouse where most of the hands would be relaxing after their day's work. Isaac guided the wagon past these familiar buildings, following a smaller track that wound through a grove of cottonwoods toward a creek that bordered one edge of the property. As they emerged from the trees, Thea caught her breath at the sight before them. Their cabin sat on a small rise overlooking the water, its windows glowing with welcoming light. Someone had clearly been there ahead of them, lighting lamps and making preparations for their arrival. But it was the cabin itself that captured Thea's attention. Far from the rough shelter Isaac had initially described, it was a charming structure, recently expanded and improved with a small porch across the front and curtains visible in the windows. "Oh, Isaac," Thea breathed. "It's beautiful. It's home," he replied simply, drawing the wagon to a halt. "Our home for as long as we want it to be." He helped her down, then swept her into his arms before she could take a step toward the door. "Tradition demands I carry you across the threshold," he explained with a smile, "and I'm not one to ignore tradition." Thea laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck as he carried her up the steps and through the door into their new life together. "Nor am I, husband, nor am I." 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on the Circle M ranch yard, the heat of the day at its peak as Thea moved between the garden beds, harvesting vegetables for the evening meal. Her wide-brimmed hat shielded her face from the worst of the sun's intensity, but perspiration still dampened the back of her simple cotton dress. A child's laughter drew her attention to the porch of the main house, where Mrs. Miller sat in the shade with Thea's 3-year-old daughter, Emma. The little girl was attempting to help string beans, though her efforts created more mess than progress. Her dark curls and serious expression were pure Isaac, but her green eyes and determined spirit were undeniably Thea's contribution. Smiling at the domestic tableau, Thea straightened from her task, one hand automatically going to the small swell of her abdomen where their second child grew. 4 months along now, the pregnancy was progressing well, with none of the difficulties that had marked Emma's arrival. "Mama." Emma called, spotting her mother in the garden. "I helping." "I see that," Thea called back, waving. "You're being a very good helper for Grandma Miller." The older woman had insisted on the grandma title from the moment Emma was born, declaring that since she had no grandchildren of her own, she was adopting Isaac and Thea's children for the purpose. It was an arrangement that benefited everyone, giving Emma surrogate grandparents and providing the Millers with the family connection they had long desired. Gathering her basket of vegetables, Thea made her way toward the house. The main structure of the Circle M had changed little in the 5 years since her arrival as Isaac's bride, but the property as a whole had flourished under their joint stewardship. The small cabin by the creek had been expanded twice, first to add a proper kitchen, then again to create a nursery when Emma was expected. Now it was a comfortable family home, still modest but perfectly suited to their needs. But the most significant change had come 2 years earlier, when Mr. Miller had made good on his long-standing intention to retire. Rather than selling the ranch outright, he had transferred majority ownership to Isaac, retaining a small share that provided income for himself and Mrs. Miller in their retirement. They had moved into Sweetwater, where they maintained a comfortable house in town, but spent much of their time at the ranch, unable to fully separate themselves from the land and people they loved. "Those tomatoes look magnificent," Mrs. Miller commented as Thea climbed the porch steps. "Your garden puts mine to shame this year. Only because you've been in town more than here," Thea replied, setting her basket on the small table between the rocking chairs. "How are the beans coming along?" "Slowly, Mrs. Miller admitted with a fond glance at Emma, who had abandoned her task in favor of playing with a rag doll. But we're enjoying the process, aren't we, sweet pea? Emma nodded solemnly. Beans is slippery. Thea laughed, stroking her daughter's unruly curls. They certainly are. Perhaps you'd like to help me make biscuits for dinner instead. You can use the special cutter Daddy brought you from Sweetwater. The little girl's face lit up at the suggestion. Yes, please. After your nap, Thea amended, noting the drowsiness beginning to cloud her daughter's eyes despite her enthusiasm. Why don't we go home and rest for a bit? Daddy will be back from the north pasture by the time you wake up. This prospect was enough to overcome Emma's token resistance to the idea of a nap. After gathering their belongings and thanking Mrs. Miller for watching Emma during Thea's garden work, mother and daughter made their way back to their own home, the little girl chattering the entire way about the adventures her doll had experienced that morning. The cabin welcomed them with its familiar comfort, the main room with its sturdy furniture built by Isaac's own hands, the kitchen with its well-organized shelves, and the cookstove that had been Thea's first major purchase for their home. The bedrooms with their colorful quilts and curtains that softened the frontier practicality of the structure. It wasn't grand by any standard, but it was filled with love and the accumulated evidence of a life well lived. Emma went down for her nap with minimal protest, lulled by the familiar routine and the promise of biscuit making upon waking. Thea spent the quiet hour preparing vegetables for dinner and starting a stew that would simmer until Isaac returned. The domestic tasks were soothing, a far cry from the desperate drudgery that had characterized her life with Jeb. Here, every meal prepared was an act of love rather than fearful obligation. Every garment mended, every floor swept, every garden tended was an investment in a shared future rather than a futile attempt to avoid criticism or violence. The difference was profound, transforming even the most mundane chores into expressions of the life she and Isaac had built together. The sound of hoofbeats announced Isaac's return just as Emma was waking from her nap. Thea watched through the window as her husband dismounted, his tall figure as familiar and beloved as her own reflection. 5 years of marriage had only deepened her love for him, adding layers of shared experience and intimate understanding to the initial attraction that had drawn them together. Emma raced out the door as soon as her feet hit the floor, launching herself at her father with complete confidence that he would catch her. Isaac swung her up into his arms with practiced ease, his deep laugh mingling with her childish giggles as he carried her into the house. "And how are my favorite ladies today?" he asked, bending to kiss Thea while still holding their daughter. "Busy and well," Thea replied, returning his kiss with a quick one of her own. "Emma has been helping Mrs. Miller with the beans, and I've harvested enough vegetables to feed half the county." "Excellent," Isaac approved, setting Emma down. "Because I've invited Hector and a few of the hands to join us for dinner. We finished the fence repairs ahead of schedule, and I promised them a reward." "I suspected as much when I saw you leading 3 horses back to the corral," Thea said dryly. "Fortunately, I always cook as if feeding an army." Isaac's smile was sheepish. "One of the many reasons I adore you, your ability to anticipate my impulsive hospitality." 5 years of marriage teaches a woman a thing or two, Thea returned, but her tone was affectionate rather than critical. In truth, she enjoyed the camaraderie of the ranch hands and the way Isaac treated them as extended family rather than mere employees. As promised, Emma helped with the biscuits while Isaac washed up and changed into clean clothes. Their dinner preparation was a well-choreographed dance, each knowing their role and moving around the kitchen with comfortable familiarity. By the time Hector and 2 of the younger hands arrived, the meal was ready and the table set for company. Dinner was a lively affair, with the men recounting tales from their day's work and sharing news from the furthest reaches of the sprawling ranch. Thea had long since overcome her initial shyness around the ranch hands, learning to appreciate their rough humor and unfailing respect for both her and Isaac. "Boss says we might expand the horse breeding operation next year," Hector mentioned as he helped himself to a 3rd biscuit. "Says them Morgans you've been raising are drawing attention all the way to Denver." Isaac nodded, bouncing Emma on his knee as she began to grow restless at the extended meal. There's good money in quality stock, better than cattle alone. And the name is proving advantageous. People assume Morgan horses from the Morgan Ranch must be something special. They are something special, Thea pointed out. Your breeding program is producing exceptional animals. The coincidence of names just helps people remember where they came from. The pride in Isaac's eyes at her defense warmed Thea more effectively than the summer sun had earlier. She had learned about horses alongside him over the years, developing a genuine appreciation for the intelligent animals and the careful work that went into improving the bloodlines. After dinner, the men returned to the bunkhouse, leaving the small family to their evening routine. Emma had her bath in the large tin tub, splashing exuberantly until Isaac's shirt was as wet as she was. Then came stories on the porch as the summer evening cooled. The little girl nestled between her parents as Isaac read from a book of children's tales Mrs. Miller had brought from her last trip to Denver. When Emma was finally asleep, tucked into her small bed with her favorite doll, Thea and Isaac returned to the porch to enjoy the last of the twilight together. These quiet moments at day's end had become a cherished ritual, a time to reconnect and share thoughts that might get lost in the busy flow of ranch life. "How are you feeling?" Isaac asked, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "You seemed tired at dinner." "I'm well," Thea assured him. "Just the normal fatigue of carrying a child while chasing a 3-year-old. Dr. Martin says everything is progressing exactly as it should." Isaac's relief was palpable. Emma's birth had been difficult, a prolonged labor that had frightened them both with its intensity. The news of this second pregnancy had brought joy mixed with anxiety, a combination Thea understood all too well. "I've been thinking," she said, changing the subject to lighter matters. "Perhaps we should consider adding another room to the house before winter. With the new baby coming, we'll need the space." "I was thinking the same thing," Isaac admitted. "Perhaps extending off the back, adding a proper dining room so the main room can remain a family space. Exactly what I had in mind." Thea squeezed his hand, still marveling sometimes at how their thoughts often aligned on practical matters. "We could use some of the lumber from that stand of pines Mr. Miller had harvested last year." "Practical as always, Mrs. Morgan." Isaac's tone was teasing but approving. "It's one of your many fine qualities. A woman raising children on a working ranch can't afford to be impractical," Thea replied, "though I do have my moments of fancy. Such as dreaming of visiting San Francisco someday," Thea admitted. "Or seeing Emma grown and educated, perhaps even attending that women's college back east that Mrs. Peterson mentioned." Isaac's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a soothing gesture that had become habitual between them. "Those aren't fancies, love. They're possibilities. The ranch is doing well enough now that we could consider a trip to San Francisco in a few years, and I've already started a fund for the children's education." This news didn't surprise Thea. Isaac had always been forward-thinking in his planning, but it touched her nonetheless. "You're a good man, Isaac Morgan. I don't tell you that often enough." "You show me every day," he replied simply, "in 1,000 ways that matter more than words." They sat in companionable silence as full darkness settled over the ranch, the stars emerging in the vast Wyoming sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. From the bunkhouse came the faint sound of a harmonica, one of the hands playing a melancholy tune that drifted on the night air. "Do you ever think about that day?" Thea asked quietly. In the saloon in Sweetwater, Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "Sometimes, when I need a reminder of how fortunate I am, or when I see you with Emma and think how different her life might have been." "I think about it too," Thea admitted. Not with regret or fear anymore, but with a sense of, I don't know, amazement perhaps, that something so terrible could lead to something so beautiful. "Providence," Isaac suggested, "or fate if you prefer. Whatever name you give it, I'm grateful every day that I walked into that saloon at precisely the right moment." "As am I." Thea leaned her head against his shoulder, content in the knowledge of how far they had come from that desperate beginning. "Though I've never quite decided if you paid too much or got a bargain when you spent 25 gold eagles on me." Isaac's laugh rumbled through his chest. The best investment I ever made, without question, though you were never purchased, Thea, only freed. And what a freedom it's been, she murmured, thinking of all they had built together, not just the physical manifestations of prosperity like the expanded cabin and growing herd, but the less tangible riches of mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep abiding love. From the woman sold for whiskey to the respected wife of the Circle MTK's owner, mother to a growing family, valued for her intelligence and character rather than her utility, it was a transformation Thea could scarcely have imagined on that terrible day 5 years ago. Yet here she sat, her husband's arm around her shoulders and their second child growing beneath her heart, as content as any woman could hope to be. "We should go in," Isaac said eventually, though he made no move to rise. "Early morning comes quickly on a ranch." "Just a few minutes more," Thea requested, unwilling to relinquish the peaceful moment. "The stars are so beautiful tonight." Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple, his breath warm against her skin. "As you wish, love, as you wish." And so they remained, wrapped in the quiet joy of a life well lived, and the promise of all the years yet to come, years that would bring challenges and sorrows, no doubt, but also immeasurable happiness in the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together, their love a fortress against whatever storms might arise. For Thea Morgan, once sold for whiskey but now cherished beyond measure, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.